Hello and welcome to JavaScript Marathon Training presented by This.Labs. I'm Sarah with This.Labs and I will be your host. We're kicking off our day with upgrade AngularJS to Angular with Angular elements. Today's trainer is Colum Ferry, software engineer at This. Welcome, Colum, to JavaScript Marathon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You can find Colum on Twitter using the handle shown at the bottom of the screen. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions or feedback. JavaScript Marathon would not be possible without our sponsors. Our sponsor today is This.Labs, your partners in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. Find out more at this.labs.com or send us an email at hi@this.co. This.Labs offers personalized training programs to suit your organizational needs, ensuring you and your company stay on the leading edge. If you find keeping up with constantly evolving technologies a struggle and want to bring your team up to speed on one of the latest technologies, contact us today at hi@this.co to set up your complimentary needs assessment. We have a ton of upcoming events for 2021. Next week is State of Vue Community on the 28th. And we also have Angular Contributor Days coming up on February 4th. For more details, visit us at this.co. And JavaScript Marathon returns Wednesday, March 24th. Follow us on This.Labs on Twitter for more details. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Colum.
Thank you. So I'm going to take you through upgrading a legacy AngularJS codebase to Angular using Angular elements. I'm going to start with a few slides just covering a basic bit of theory, and then we're going to do some live coding so we'll actually see an AngularJS codebase being upgraded, or at least parts of it. So my name is Colum, like Sarah said, and I'm a software engineer at This.Labs. I've got two pictures here. The one on the left is how I looked, at least pre-quarantine haircut, and the one on the right is what I look like on social media. So you can find me on Twitter using the handle mentioned at the bottom of the screen, and please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any questions or concerns, feedbacks, anything at all. Just reach out to me. So why should we upgrade? Why should we upgrade a legacy AngularJS codebase? I think the first reason would be that AngularJS loses support from Google on the 31st of December 2021. It was originally going to lose support in July, but due to COVID, they have added 6 months to that just to allow teams more time to actually get a chance to upgrade. And that means that when the AngularJS does lose support, vulnerabilities won't get patched, bug fixes won't get merged, and it's going to make it more difficult to maintain your AngularJS code bases. Another reason is that with modern build tooling grants lots more benefits. So one major overlooked benefit of modern tooling is that it massively improves developer experience. A lot of React developers might tell you about hot module replacement that Webpack offers, and it's where you can save a file and you'll instantly see those changes being reloaded. So happier developers is always a good thing. There's also better debugging tools to help track down issues. We finally also get better production bundles, and that also helps increase the performance of applications just straight out of the box. We get the Angular Ivy compiler, which uses tree shaking to remove any unused code, and it's just a little bit faster in terms for medium to large sized code bases. And finally, it's going to get a lot more difficult to actually hire AngularJS developers. So if we try to hire Angular developers, as time progresses, more and more Angular developers are only going to have experience with Angular from Angular 2+. They're not going to know much about AngularJS or anything at all. And by forcing our own developers to continually work with AngularJS, it also prevents their career growth possibilities, as they're not getting a chance to work with modern frameworks and tools unless they do it outside of working hours. So we don't just have to upgrade using Angular elements. There are other options available to us, and some of these options are like the Big Bang rewrite, and that's by far the easiest way to migrate a legacy code base. And it's just by starting fresh from the ground up. But it's a major engineering effort, and it shouldn't be taken lightly, because for some customers, you're going to have to tell them that there's no new features going to be added to the AngularJS version of the app while you're rebuilding everything in Angular. Another option is the ng upgrade. So ng upgrade provides us with the upgrade module, and that then itself also gives us 2 further options. We can either run our current AngularJS app and downgrade new Angular code that we've written into it and use those Angular components and services within AngularJS, or we can take the Angular app and run that and upgrade AngularJS code, so AngularJS services or components, and let those be available to the Angular app. And finally, we've got the Angular Elements options. So this is the option we're going to explore in this talk. And what Angular Elements does is that it takes Angular components and converts them to web components. So these web components can then be used in any code base. So as long as the minimum browser that your code base needs to supports custom elements, these custom elements can be run in any JavaScript framework without JavaScript, vanilla JS. It's more platform agnostic this way. It also forces you to follow the container presentational, the smart dumb component pattern, and that also leads to better just components, less coupled code base, and just more scalability and more reusable components. So now that we know how we're going to do our upgrade, do we need a strategy for upgrading, or do we just jump right on it? Obviously, it's better to have a strategy. And one of the basic strategies is just to view your app as a tree of components and then target the lowest hanging fruits on that tree and start working your way from the bottom up. So if we take, for example, that you've got an app, it's an AngularJS app, which has a homepage, and then this homepage has a nav bar, and the nav bar has a search component. We can see that the search component is our lowest hanging fruit. So we'd first create a new Angular component for that search component, and we'd use Angular Elements then to build it and turn it into a web component. So this search component is now a web component that can be used in any HTML file, really. So then we replace the search component from the AngularJS code base with this new web component, and then we start working on up. So we start incrementally increasing that, moving on to the navbar next, and then from the navbar to the homepage, and so on until we've completely finished upgrading the full app. So now we're going to jump into some live coding and see how we could do this. I've set up an AngularJS app to help with this. So I've created an app to search the Star Wars API to see some extra information related to like the Star Wars universe. So this is the app here. If when we first come to it, we've seen no results, and we can just search something that's related to Star Wars in any manner. So if we try to search for like Luke Skywalker, we can see that we get back Luke Skywalker. He's got height of 172 centimeters. We get back some planets, so we get Solust, and then we get back species, Solistan, some starships, and some vehicles. So it gives back a lot of results just based on things that happened or are available within the Star Wars universe and Star Wars lore. I can quickly show you the code behind this. So we can see that we've got our AngularJS app, a search bar, which correlates to the search bar here, the search results, which are these results, and then these results are broken down into different types. So we've got films, we've got people, planets, species, starships, and vehicles, and each of them just do a different manner of rendering data because there's different data for each of these different types. Finally, we've got the full search result component, which uses an NGF to show which type of result, which type of component we actually want to see. And then finally, we've got our home view, which contains a search bar, and then our controller to render and repeat how many search results we need for many search results we got back from our API request. Our API request lives in our search service, and it basically just searches using our search term across all the different types within the Star Wars API, and then it collates them onto one array. So now that we've done that, we're going to look at how we would actually attempt to do this, how we would approach this in terms of creating a new Angular app. So the way I would suggest to do it would be to create a new NX workspace. So NX is a set of dev tools that allows us to create a monorepo, and that monorepo gives us a lot of additional tooling around creating scalable and maintainable code bases. It also means that we can have our Angular app and our AngularJS app living within the same code base, and they can share code between them if needs be. And it also provides us with a folder structure that helps promote scalable teams, scalable code development just across the full company if you're doing this at a company. So the first thing we would do is we would install the NX DevTools globally. We'd use npm install global NX. I've installed this already, so I'm going to just skip this step. And then next you would run npx create NX workspace. And we're going to use the latest version of the tool. And we're going to create a Star Wars search live. And this is going to be the name of our workspace. So when we do that, it starts to create it. It's going to ask us what type of workspace we want. We're going to say we want an Angular workspace because we're going to build an Angular application. We give it a name. We'll call it Star Wars Search. And then we're going to use SAS. SAS is most commonly used, as far as I've been aware of, for Angular applicasions. We're going to use ESLint for the linter because TSLint is deprecated, and the Angular team are actually moving towards ESLint. But I think at the moment there's just some TSLint rules that aren't as easily converted to ESLint. NX Cloud, say yes, it does provide faster builds, and it provides a lot more benefits on top of that. So like a cloud computational cache allows for faster builds because it determines what has been built and what libraries has been affected. So it only rebuilds what needs to be rebuild. For now, let's just say it gives us faster builds, and look into it more. I'll add a link to it to the resources section, and it's definitely worth looking into. So this is going to take a while to create. I'm going to skip that because I've already completed this setup. I'll just take a quick look through what it actually creates. It creates a new app called Star Wars Search, which is just your basic seed for an Angular app. It creates an end-to-end application, which uses Cypress for integration and end-to-end testing, and then some more config files. So if we take a look at how this looks in Angular or VS Code, we can see our folder structure has two apps on it: a Star Wars Search and Star Wars Search end-to-end file. It's got a libraries folder. This is where we put any library that your app depends on. So NX promotes a pattern of creating libraries that relate to different feature modules or UI packages, data access within your application. So if your application has a feature module, you would create a feature folder for it. If you've got a UI library specific to your application, you create a UI library within this folder, and that just allows the different teams, different feature teams to create and work within a silo where they only affect their own code. And if they do affect other areas within the application, NX will know what's affected and determine what needs to be rebuilt or what tests need to be run to make sure that nothing breaks. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder to store our AngularJS application. And this is going to be our AngularJS search. And what we're basically going to do now is we're going to drag everything, all the code from our AngularJS app into this folder, just as it stood. So we'll grab all these files and just copy them on. As this is all static files, we can just create an npm script to serve this locally so that we can see what's happening as we are developing. So I've installed a dependency called watch HTTP server, and that allows us just to create a very simple script. I'm going to turn off those keyboard shortcuts. Sentence. So if we create a new script called serve AngularJS search and set that to watch HTTP server apps AngularJS search. We should now be able to do npm run serve. Spell it wrong. And that will allow us to view it on localhost. So that's our app now running locally, and we can use it as normal. So we can get see Chewbacca's result. So now we're going to move on to actually creating our first Angular element. So like we identified before, we've seen that the lowest hanging fruit was the search result. So search result and the different types of search results that there are. So how we're going to do this is we're going to create a library, UI library, because these are all presentational components, and we're going to use the NX generator to do that, the NX CLI. So we're going to do NX generate a library, and we're going to call it UI search result. This creates a new folder on the libs folder, and it contains the basic setups for an Angular module. And next, now we're going to need to start adding our components. So each component that we need. So if we look at the search results again, we see we need films, people, planets, species, starships, vehicles, and then the actual search result component itself. So we start with the search result component and just generate or scaffold out the files that we need for that. And we're going to set the project flag to the UI search results. That will create a new component within our library. And it's just a basic scaffolding with ng on that, everything with a basic HTML template. Again, it's everything that we need just to get up and running. So we're going to do this now for every type of search result that we've got. So we do for films, people, planets, species, starships, and then finally vehicles. We can now see within our search result folder, we've got the same folder structures we had for AngularJS. And now the next step is to take each of these AngularJS components and just move them and convert them on the Angular components. So we'll start from the top and we'll convert the films. So my usual approach is to grab the HTML as it stands and just replace the HTML in the new Angular component. So first thing we'll notice is that we no longer have controllers in Angular as we did in AngularJS. So we can remove the code for all the controllers, and then that leaves us with a film property. Film property doesn't yet exist on the component. So first thing we're going to look at is what was the film property on the AngularJS component. We can see that this controller had a binding, and it was a film, and the less than sign means it was a one-way input. So we can easily convert a one-way input to Angular simply by creating an input using the input decorator. And for now, we're going to give it type of any until we know exactly what type we need. We'll remove the on init and the import for it, as this is a purely presentational component. There's no logic going on here. It's just rendering data. And if we look back now at the actual component, we can see the different types, the different properties that our film object has. So if we select all the films and then select each of these types, each of these properties, sorry, we can then create a type. Assign the multi-strings. Episode ID is actually a number, so we can change that to number. Everything else is strings. And then we can set this type from any to film. And that's that AngularJS films component converted to Angular. So very simple, very easy to do. Just go through the HTML first and then replace it with films and then replace the component input. All these search result types are the same. So we just do them all very quickly. Again, people is going to be an input. People or person? It's person. And then again, we're going to create our type by grabbing all the properties. I place any type of person. Now we're going to do the same for planets. We can see the population here has a number filter, so we know straight away the population is going to be a type of number. So when we create our type this time, we know to change population from a string to a number. We'll add the input of planet and give it the type planet. And we'll move on to species. We have two left now, just starships and vehicles. Finally, vehicles. Again, we're always moving the controls. We no longer have controllers. Okay, so we've converted 6 AngularJS components to Angular, very simply. They're very basic components, in fairness. They're just straight inputs that were rendering data, purely presentational components. But now we're going to move on to the actual search result component. As we'd seen in the AngularJS search component, there was a bit of logic here. So it's got the ngIf to determine what type of search result it should show. So if we look at the component on the AngularJS side, we can see it's got an input of search data. It's also got a function that runs when the component is initiated. So it determines then if it's a person, if it's a film, planet, species, and uses this data to figure out what type of search result it should show. So if we're going to convert this to Angular, again, we'll start first by grabbing the search result, HTML, replacing the controls, and finally we'll notice that the ngif syntax is incorrect. So ng-if is the AngularJS form. The Angular form is using the asterisk ngif. Finally, the inputs in AngularJS, you just use the input as if it was an HTML attribute, whereas with Angular, we have to actually show that it's a binding. So we need to surround this with square brackets to show that it is a binding to pass through the object and not just a string. Next thing we'll notice is that these selectors are potentially incorrect. So if we look at the selector for the people search result, we can actually see that it's *search people. So an NX and Angular CLI convention is to append the app's prefix to the components. That way then you can see that it's scoped to this workspace, it's scoped to that app, and it helps determine, differentiate between third-party components or built-in components, etc. So we'll need to replace these with the *search and then --people. So we can see IntelliSense helps us films. Okay, so now that we've fixed those errors, we can see new errors. So these new errors are that we don't have the conditional, so we don't have this person, this film existing on our search result component yet, and we also don't have the search data. So we need these to be within our application, within our component. So we know that search data is an input. We also know that search data can only be a type of any of the films of the search results, and as we created those types already, we can simply use them. So we can say it's going to be a film, people, a person, planet, species, starship, or vehicle. We can import the rest of these. So this should be person. So we don't need a constructors, we're not injecting anything. We do, however, need to figure out, okay, what type of search result should I show? So if we look back at the AngularJS component, we can see that there's an on-init method. So this is more or less synonymous with the ng on-init. So if we copy everything that's within this function, we can use it here. So another thing, if we look back at the AngularJS component, we can see that we've set the control variable to this, which is this scope of the function. Within Angular, we use TypeScript, so everything is scoped within the class. Therefore, we no longer need to create a control, which is the scope, and instead we can just use this keyword. Now we've got these new issues where we still need to declare these properties within the class. So we can simply grab them all. And they're all Booleans, and we'll set them all to false to start with. Very simple. That's our search result component completely converted. All our components are converted from AngularJS to Angular. Again, very simple, not too much logic, but it shows you how easy it can be to convert your AngularJS components to Angular. And then the next step now that we want to do is actually build this into a web component using Angular elements. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to create an entry point for our application. So we need to create a new app which will bootstrap the Angular elements. So we're going to use the NX CLI again and do NX generate application. Star Wars search elements. We don't need rooting for it. And we'll see that a new app has been created, which is our Star Wars search elements. Now we want to actually add the Angular elements package and allow it to work with that one app. So we'll use NX add Angular elements. And we're going to say the project that we want to add it to is the Star Wars search elements app. So it's going to install those packages via npm and set up some config to allow this to build using Angular elements. Okay, that's completed. And as you can see, it's updated the package JSON and it's updated the polyfills to allow for the document register element. We no longer need the app component, so we can delete those files. And remove any associations to them. We're going to want to import our search results module. We'll also need to export our actual search result component. So within our app module now of our Star Wars search elements, we're going to import our UI search module, search results module, sorry. And I messed up spelling somewhere. UI search result, sorry. Okay, and we're going to need to add an entry component. Now, entry components are deprecated. However, for Angular elements to work, it still relies on entry components. I'm not sure what the path forward for Angular is regarding that, but for now we do need to add the component that we want. I should export. We should. This reminds me. We should export the search component from the index.ts. So the borrow file within our UI search result library. And now we want to actually use Angular elements as helper methods to turn this Angular component into a web component that can be used anywhere. So we'll start off with a constructor within this app module, where we're going to inject the Angular injector. I'm going to create a search result component. So when you use the method called create custom element, that should be added. Now this takes an argument of the component that you want to actually turn into the web component, so the search result component, and then we'll pass on the injector as an object. Next, we want to say custom elements. Find search result and pass it the component. So this does is this will add the search result or search result component to the custom elements registry with a HTML tag of search-result. Finally, we need to tell the app module that it needs to bootstrap manually. So we do that by creating an empty method. It will complain about having an empty method because of ESLint. So there's a comment that we can add to tell ESLint just to ignore that empty function. This is required for Angular elements. Okay, so that's the basic setup that we need to convert our search result component to a web component using Angular elements. So now what we want to do is we want to actually build these files so that we can import them into our AngularJS application to be used. So we're going to use nx build. We're going to create a production build, and we're going to target the project Star Wars search elements. So this is NX is now going to build these files first and create a cache of them. So if they don't change, they don't need to be rebuilt. If they do change, they will be rebuilt. We can see that there's 4 files outputted, 3 JavaScript and 1 style, 1 CSS. We're not using any custom CSS within this application. It's using Bootstrap. So we don't need to worry about the CSS in this case. And we can see that the output from this build is here within the dist folder, dist apps Star Wars search elements. Now, to get this to work for AngularJS, we need to copy these JavaScript files into the AngularJS application and then load them under the index.html. However, constantly copying 3 JavaScript files over isn't great. You can create a CI pipeline with some scripts that will make this a lot easier to do. But for now, we're going to create a very, very simple script just to help speed up the process. So we're going to create a new file. And we're going to just call it concat elements bundle. It's going to be a JavaScript file. And we're going to use Node.js just to help us bundle these 3 JavaScript files together. So we need to store the path to the files. And then we're going to read the directory. And we're going to filter out only the JavaScript files. Next, we're going to create an empty variable, which is going to contain our file data. So we're going to read each of these files using a for loop. And we're going to just append the data to this one variable. And then finally, we're going to write out this file data. So we can run this off the command line just by using node. We can see that a new file has been created, Angular Elements bundle. If we copy this file and place it in the scripts folder from the AngularJS app, it will make it available for the AngularJS application to load. So now we need to edit the index HTML to actually allow it to load on. So if we look, we can see that we're including the search result component from AngularJS and all the different types of those search results. So we can safely get rid of all of those and simply include the bundle instead, allowing us to completely delete this folder, the search result folder from the AngularJS application. And now finally, we need to clean up what's happening here within the home HTML. So at the moment, it's trying to find the AngularJS component. Realistically, we should be able to just use the ngprop approach to set the search data, and it will just find that this is an AngularJS component, or a web component, and AngularJS will bind the result from the search results to that data, to that input in the web component. We can try it, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be some issues here. I couldn't fully get that ngprop approach to work. So if we do a hard refresh and then try to do a search, it's not showing up the search result. So the alternative is to programmatically create those, create the web component. So if we create a new function called create search results, we want to grab the results container, which we can see here is the ID. So we just document get element by ID. And then we're going to loop through all the search results that is returned from our search method. We're going to create a new div to contain the search result component. We'll give it class call 3 so it renders correctly. And now we're going to create our result component. So we use document.create element search result. So that matches the HTML tag that we defined within our app module for the web components. You can see it here. And then we've got access now to its inputs, its properties. So we can say that the search data is going to be equal to the search result. And then we're going to append that to the div. And then finally, we're going to append that div to the results container. We're going to check first if there was any search results returned. There's no point trying to create these web components if the search returned no results. So check if the length is greater than 0, and then we simply call the function create search results. And finally, we're going to do another scope digest just to kick off the digest cycle. We do a hard refresh and we search, we can now see Chewbacca shows up. So this is our web component. It's been completely converted from AngularJS. If we look at the elements, we can see search result. And if we do another search, we can see that all the different types are still showing up. We've got Luke Skywalker, we've got the planets, we've got species, we've got starships and the vehicles. If we try to search for A New Hope, we get the film. So all these components are all Angular components, and we can now see them all within built as web components. Very similar. It's easy enough to see this because we can see here that our tag is Star Wars search film. That matches our Angular component, not our AngularJS component. So we can see that we successfully converted our AngularJS components to Angular. We used Angular elements to build them as web components, and then we simply include those web components back in their AngularJS app and fully replace those components. Okay. So I'm going to switch back to the slides now. We did it, and I added a wee I hope because I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not, but it did. So thanks. I'm kind of happy with that. And then finally, any questions now?
Awesome job, Colum.
Thanks.
Really enjoyed that session. So we have opened up the floor to questions. We do have a little bit of delay, so we can wait a little bit for some more questions to come in, but we do have one. It's actually a two-part question from Ian. Ian, thank you for your question. Do you think a legacy AngularJS app will eventually stop building or running?
I do not. I think they'll still be able to run because as long as it's still going to be available. AngularJS scripts are going to be available, which are going to bootstrap the application. So it'll never stop running because we're losing support. But you're going to lose out on bug fixes, vulnerability patches, security issues. All those types of things are going to stop being merged, stop being added to the AngularJS codebase to prevent and basically secure your application going forward.
Great. And then what other risks do companies run by not upgrading? Security vulnerabilities or browser support issues, perhaps?
So yeah, security vulnerabilities is a major one. Also bug fixes and browser support issues could potentially happen. I don't see that being as likely, but there will be the issue then of, I was going to say something, I've completely lost track of what I was about to say. Yeah, it's mostly security vulnerabilities and bug fixes.
Great. And I think that for now, that's all the questions that we have. If you're watching this later or you have any questions after that, feel free to get a hold of Colum on Twitter. So his Twitter handle is FerryColum. I will drop that in the comments for everyone if you want to get a hold of him and have any questions further. Other than that, I think that's it. Colum, anything else to add? Or are we ready to go?
No, that's everything.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. We are back in 40 minutes with Hunter Miller, Intro to Tailwind CSS. Don't miss it. And we will see y'all soon.